Good morning. It's a beautiful spring slash winter morning. It's not quite spring yet. Spring's coming. It's absolutely stunning. Look at the sky. And today, when I get home, I am going to be showing you how to start seeds indoors. For a lot of people, this seems to hold a lot of mystery to it. I know that when I was sort of just in the theoretical stages of growing my own food, this was something that really baffled me. I didn't know how to do it, when to do it, why to do it. So I want to answer those questions for you today, and just demystify it a little bit. So I'm going to take this naughty pup home and show you how to start seeds indoors. See you in a bit. Right, let's talk about starting seeds indoors. Now in this video I am going to talk you through starting seeds both with and without supplemental lighting indoors. This may run on for a little while because there is a lot to cover, so grab yourself a brew and a notepad and a pen. So first of all, why would you even want to start seeds indoors? Well, there are a number of reasons. The main one being that you want to start your seeds in a controlled environment, potentially before the time they might have to go outside into the ground. The main reason that you're going to want to start your seeds indoors is for varieties that take a really long time to come to maturity. So these are things like your tomatoes, peppers, aubergines. Some of these can take over 100 days to produce their first fruit. And if you plant them in the ground after the last frost date, so for us in most of the UK that's the end of May, start of June, by the time that plant has produced its first fruit, we're looking towards our first frost of the end of the season, and so you're just not going to get as good a harvest. So for these plants, we plant them indoors much earlier, before our last frost date has passed, in order to get a head start on the season. For other crops that may not take as long to come to maturity, things like beetroots, spring onions, leafy greens, all of these sorts of things that actually grow quite quickly, you might want to start them indoors for a number of reasons. Firstly, you might want to keep them protected from bugs, pests, diseases, especially slugs just absolutely love mowing down an entire row of new seedlings. And so you might want to start them indoors to keep them protected, and then plant them out once they're a little bit bigger, usually when they have 3 to 5 true leaves. Another reason might be that you're practicing catch cropping, so that's where you take out one plant and immediately you have some ready to go plug plants that take its place, so you're not having to wait a couple of weeks for seeds to germinate, to sprout, and then to get up to some kind of size where they can start building momentum. You might be trying to get a jump start on the season, even with these shorter day to maturity crops. For example, I experimented this year with starting some seeds indoors for leafy greens back at the end of January. We're now at the end of February and they're ready to plant out into my polytunnel. Just 2 weeks ago, we were having really quite hard freezes, and so the plants that now have a whole month's worth of growth on them would probably only have a week or two at this point if I'd planted them directly outside. And if you are particularly anal, starting your seeds indoors does mean that you can establish right away which your best plant is out of the number of seeds that you have sown in a module, and you can plant them out at the perfect spacing. This works really well for things like square foot gardening, where you might only have one broccoli or one cauliflower plant in 1 square foot, and you don't want to waste a whole bunch of seeds and have the potential of slugs coming along and mowing it down before that one plant can get established. So how do you go about it? Well, there are 2 main methods, and I'm going to cover both of them. One is slightly more expensive and the other takes slightly more time. This is the trade-off that we talk about all the time on this channel. You can either choose to pay more money, or you can choose to invest more time. So when it comes to lighting, you can get as complicated or as basic as you like. There are a lot of really expensive grow lights on the market. However, these are for plants that you're wanting to take to maturity and usually marketed towards a certain type of illicit plant grower. For taking a plant from seed to seedling, so that's where it has maybe 5 to 3 true leaves, you actually don't need those really expensive lights unless, for example, you're a market grower who is going to be selling these plug plants in the future. Now, I like to go for an LED grow light, mainly because they do not put out as much heat as a fluorescent light bulb would, and they don't take as much energy, though they can be a slightly larger investment in the beginning, but to be honest with you, I've not found it to be that big of a difference. When it comes to purchasing your LED grow light, there are 2 main numbers that you need to look out for. Now, we can go into a lot more depth on this if you like, and if you would like that, please do put a comment down below and I will make you a separate video all about grow lights. But for the purpose of this general overview, the 2 main numbers that you need to look for on your grow light is number 1, the number of lumens. So this, for want of a better word, is the amount of visible light that this particular light bulb is going to give off. And you want a minimum of about 5,000 lumens on your light bulb. And number 2, you want to look at the Kelvin. Now the Kelvin is the spectrum or the wavelength of light that this bulb is going to put out. Now, at a lot of online or in-person shops that you go to, this is going to be expressed in daylight, full spectrum, cool white, or warm white. You are looking for a daylight or a full spectrum light. Basically, this is going to have all the different colors of light in it, and it's going to give your plants the best start in life. When it comes to how many Kelvin, I like to look for 6,500, around about that mark. Anything over 6,000 is going to be okay. 6,500, 6,400 is the number that I've seen on most of the lights that I like to use. Okay, so let's wind it back a little bit. So when you're starting your seeds indoors, you're going to be growing in something called plug trays or cell trays. And you're also going to want a water tray or a gravel tray, they're sometimes called, underneath your plug tray in order to be able to water your plants and not get it all over your house. You want to firm your compost in so as that you don't have a whole bunch of air bubbles and so your compost doesn't sink massively the first time that you water it. Now, a lot of people like to use a specialist seed compost or a seed starting mix. I'm going to be really honest with you, I just use a basic multi-purpose compost if you want, and it has lots of bits in it. You can sieve those out. Most of the time I don't even bother with that. For the more advanced grower, that might give them that little edge, but if you're just doing this at home, it's just another step that's, yeah, it's necessary, but it's not like the most necessary thing in the world, if you know what I mean. So, grab your multi-purpose compost, stick it into your cell trays, you want to firm it in nicely, and then you're going to give it a really good watering. I like to use a rose head watering can because this is going to distribute the water droplets nicely, so it's not just going to tsunami in there and splash compost everywhere. So give it a really nice water though until all of that compost is nice and wet. You can let it drain for a couple of minutes, and then you're going to pop the cell tray into your gravel tray or your water tray and bring it inside ready for planting. Most plants can be started off indoors, so when it comes to what seeds you're starting, pretty much anything other than a long tap-rooted vegetable, so things like parsnips and carrots, can be started indoors. Whether they should be or not is a discussion for another day. Now, when it comes to how to plant your seeds, you want to go by what's in your hand. You want to let the seed tell you how deeply it wants to be planted. The general rule of thumb is that each seed should be planted double the depth of the widest part. So for example, this broad bean is about, 2 centimeters in width across its widest part. So I would be sowing this about 4 centimeters deep, so as that the same amount of compost covers the seed. For some really tiny seeds, you can literally just sprinkle them over the surface of the soil, pat them down, and they're good to go. One quick note on larger seeds like this, because this is where I see a lot of people failing. So this applies to things like beans, melons, cucumbers, courgettes, a lot of these larger seeded plants. When you get a big seed like this, you want to plant it on its thinnest edge. So you want to plant it so as that it is facing upwards, not lying flat like this. If it's lying flat like this, water can pool on it and it can cause this seed to rot instead of germinating. And that's just a waste of good seed. So always make sure that your larger seeds, you're planting these vertically so as that they have a chance to germinate before any kind of rot sets in. Okay, so you've planted your seeds, you've covered them back up with soil, they're nice and warm and damp, and it's perfect, for germination. Now you wait, and at this point your seeds don't need any light unless you've surface sowed them, in which case you do want to give them some light. And this is the part that most gardeners really struggle with, because some seeds, like peppers, can take over a month to germinate. So be patient. Don't go digging in the soil for your seeds. Just let them do their thing. The only thing you need to do is make sure that those seeds don't dry out. Now, you don't want them sopping wet because, again, they can rot. But you do want to make sure that the soil is damp to the touch. And if it's not, just give it a little sprinkle, again, of water. However, as soon as your seeds germinate and those little green heads start popping out from the soil, you want to stop overhead watering immediately. If you overhead water, so that's watering from the top, any brand new seedlings, they are at serious risk of a disease called dampening off. So this is a fungal disease which will basically infect the base of the plant, and then all of a sudden one day the base will just shrivel up and the whole plant will just topple to the ground, dead. There's no reviving a plant from damping off. The way to overcome this is to use your water or gravel tray. So you want to, when the soil starts drying out, fill up your water or gravel tray with water, let your plants soak up as much water as they need in 30 minutes, and then dump off any of the extra water. This way you're going to make sure that you're not overwatering your plants and suffocating them from the roots up, but you're also not exposing them to the risk of dampening off. Now, this is where the differences come in between if you're growing with or without grow lights. If you're growing with grow lights, now's the time to turn them on. Your seeds have germinated and they need light, so give it to them ASAP. Now, especially with LEDs, they're not going to put off as much heat as a fluorescent bulb, and so you want to get them really nice and close in to your seedlings. Again, if we're not using super expensive lights here, they are going to need to be that little bit closer because they're probably not putting off as many lumens. So the general rule of thumb is between 1 to 3 inches from the surface or from the top of your tallest plant that you've got going. Pop your grow lights at that level. I have mine on a really rudimentary pulley system, so I can pull them up and down as needed. And I'm happy to give you a video on how I set up my grow lights. Again, if you want that, just comment down below. If you are growing without grow lights, you are going to have to put in some more legwork, but it's perfectly doable. It does, however, depend on there not being freezing temperatures outdoors. I would suggest if your air temperatures are below 5 degrees Celsius, do not do this. Wait a little bit longer. So, if your plants have germinated and the air temperature outside is above 5 degrees Celsius, preferably above 10, then what you're going to do is you're going to start taking your plants outdoors during the day and bring them back in at night, because at night time the temperature drops, you have a much greater risk of frost. This is providing your plants with the light that they need, and it also has the added benefit that your plants will be hardened off way before someone who started indoors, because we have to go through that process as well. You're going to plant and water your seeds exactly the same as someone who is starting with a grow light. You just have to put in that extra legwork of taking them outdoors and back inside. So, what do you do once your plants get to the 3 to 5 true leaf stage? Well, when your plant first germinates, it has little leaves that are not their true leaves. You'll notice that most plants when they germinate look pretty much exactly the same. I'll put the name of the type of leaf they are here because I always say it wrong. But these leaves are sort of the starting off leaves, and then the true leaves that show you the identity of the plant will come through. Now once you have between 3 and 5 of these, your plant is probably ready to go outside, so long as the temperatures are sufficient. Now the good news is, if you're growing without grow lights, you can just pop those plants right out, shove them in the ground, firm them in, give them a water, and you are good to go. However, if you've been growing under grow lights, you need to take an extra step, which is called hardening off. Now, a lot of people think that hardening off is solely to acclimatize the plant to the temperatures outdoors. And whilst this is true, your plant hasn't been exposed to wind, it hasn't been exposed to cold temperatures. The main thing that you're trying to acclimatize your plant to at this point is actually UV light, because the light bulbs that we've been using haven't contained UV, and so your plant could get sunburn. And this is actually something that happens to a lot of people because they miss the hardening off steps, their plants get sunburnt, they get frazzled, and they die. And after you've put so much love and care into them, that is the last thing you want to happen. Actually, on that note, I want to add a little tip for you. When your plants are growing indoors underneath the grow lights, you can actually stimulate the sensation of wind and animals passing by running your hand or a feather very gently over your seedlings on a regular basis, or you can run a fan that will have a very similar effect. And this does actually make your plants stronger. They'll get more stocky at the base, they're less likely to get leggy, and they will be much better acclimatized to that sort of thing when you put them outside. But the actual process of hardening off goes a little bit like this. Over the course of a week, you're going to take your plants outdoors for a progressively longer period of time. Try starting off on a nice afternoon or evening, because that's when the UV light will be slightly diminished, and so you're not going to shock your plants straight away. So you're going to take your plants outside for about 20 minutes to half an hour, bring them back indoors. The next day you're going to do it for an hour. The next day you're going to do it for 2 to 3 hours, and so on until you can leave your plants outdoors for a whole day. Now you may find, to begin with, they go a little bit limp and look a little bit like they might be dying. This is perfectly natural. All of a sudden your plants have gone from a lovely, cushy, cozy environment to wind blowing past them, their water's evaporating off, and they're just stressed out. Give them a little water when you bring them back indoors and they should revive just fine. Once your plants can withstand a full day outdoors, you can give them a couple more days to acclimatize, and then you can just pop them straight out and pop them in the ground. Now, there is a misconception that if you are going to be growing something undercover, such as in a polytunnel, you don't need to harden off your plants. This is not true, because again, you're hardening them off to the UV of the sun as well as to the conditions outdoors. So you must go through the hardening off process even if you're planting undercover. Now, at this point you may be scratching your head and asking yourself, but Victoria, I've seen so many things online that people have started their plants off indoors and put them on windowsills and they've grown perfect and fine. If you have the most amazing south-facing window or conservatory that gets just tons and tons of sunlight, you might get away with it. Now, the reason that I don't recommend that you start seedlings off on a windowsill is manifold. First of all, you've got the sun coming from just one direction, and even if you're in a conservatory, the house is blocking off a lot of the rest of the sunlight, and so the plant is just going to continuously grow towards the light, and it ends up stretching and becoming leggy. Now, even if you turn that plant, you can't possibly keep up with the same kind of movement as the sun would have as it tracks across the sky, which would cause your plant to grow nice and evenly. And so I found that with this method, I just have such bad success. And also, like many of you, I'm busy, I'm lazy, I have a lot going on, I forget things, and more often than not, that means that that plant on the windowsill gets left for days on end and ends up really leggy and looking like the Leaning Tower of Pizza. So I just really don't recommend starting plants on windowsills because it's always had really poor success rates for the people that I've seen use it. And I don't want you guys to fail. I want to give you guys a recipe for success. So you're thinking, okay, Victoria, I can either start them indoors under grow lights and spend that extra money, or I can spend my time ferrying seedlings inside, outside. This sounds like an awful lot of work, and it is. Trust me, if you're doing this every single day, once you get lots and lots of plants, this can take a while. And we haven't even talked about potting on and potting up for your tomatoes, peppers, aubergines, etc. And they will need that. We can talk about that in another video though. This is more about just starting your seeds. If you're in that situation where taking your plants indoors and outside, that seems like way too much hard work, you know that you're not going to be able to stick to it, but you're not ready to invest in grow lights, there is another option for you, and it involves having a little bit of patience. I know, I hate being patient too. But this is what I'd say. If you're one of those people who would ordinarily start your plants off on a windowsill and they'd get really leggy and you'd get really frustrated and you'd wonder what you were doing wrong, wait until the middle of March and plant everything that you can directly. Now, there's still going to be things like your peppers, your tomatoes, and your aubergines that if you want to grow, they will need to be started off. But here's a life hack. Just go buy them as plants. Go down to your local garden centre and just grab the plants. For me, it's a no-brainer. If you only want to grow 1 or 2 tomato plants and you just want to enjoy homegrown fresh tomatoes and you don't want to go through all of the hassle of starting them from seed, just go buy them. There's no shame in it. You know I'm a big proponent of starting from seed, but that's because I love the excitement and the variety. But you can work up to that. If you're just starting your journey, make your life easier for yourself and just go buy them. Now for cold tolerant plants, like I said, just wait until the middle of March. That's when here in the UK, most cold tolerant crops, so that's your leafy greens, your brassicas, which is broccoli, kale, that kind of thing, and most of your root vegetables can be planted direct from seed outside without any protection. You can bring that further back to the end of February if you have something like a polytunnel or a greenhouse, but for most of you, just start them directly outside in the ground. Now, one of my next videos is going to be all about how to plant seeds directly and give your plants the best head start if you're planting them outdoors. So make sure you're subscribed so that you catch that video. Let me know in the comment section below what it is that you're going to be starting indoors, or whether you're going to be starting indoors. Are you going to be using grow lights, or are you going to be using the indoors-outdoors method? Let me know, I'd love to hear from you, and I can't wait to see you again in my next video. Don't forget, no matter how busy you are, no matter how much you have on your plate, you can have your garden and eat it too without breaking your back or the bank. I'll see you guys soon. Mwah. Bye! Firstly, you might want to keep them there. Now, the lumens, I'm gonna get this wrong. Okay, I have just tried to film this section like 500 times.